The ration brick was already in my hand when I found her. I want to be clear about that, because people ask me later, did I plan it? Did I go looking for someone to give it to? Was it some kind of gesture? It wasn't. I was carrying my last day's ration the same way I'd carried every other meal for 6 weeks on Vithu station, in the left breast pocket of my field jacket, wrapped in the standard brown mess paper, heat-sealed at one end and stamped with the date in violet ink the way logistics stamps everything. I had it in my hand because I'd been eating it in pieces all morning while I ran head counts, and I hadn't finished the last piece when I turned down the side corridor between what used to be a market block and the collapsed shell of a transit arch, and there she was. She was sitting with her back to the arch's inner wall. Not hiding exactly. There was nowhere left to hide in that part of the city. The Rethkai advance had come through Vithu station 11 days before we did, and the advance doesn't leave doors. It doesn't leave walls if the walls are load-bearing. What it leaves is the outsides of things, and this girl was sitting inside the outside of a transit arch, which meant she had 4 partial walls and about half a roof and nothing else. She was young. I couldn't read Vithu ages well then, but young. The fur on her neck and jaw was the pale gold color that the Vithu elders had told our cultural liaison meant she hadn't reached her secondary growth yet. She was wearing what looked like 2 adult garments cut down and tied together at the waist, and she had her knees drawn up and her hands pressed flat on the stone floor, and she was watching me with the particular stillness that I recognized from every other scared thing I'd ever seen that didn't have the energy left to run. I stopped. That was all I did. I stopped in the arch opening and I didn't move toward her and I didn't speak, because our cultural liaison had also told us that the Vithu in the outer station spoke a dialect so far removed from the standard that our auto-translators picked up maybe 60% of it, and 60% of a frightened child's language is not enough to tell her she's safe. So I stopped. I held the ration brick in my hand so she could see it. I waited. She said something in 4 syllables. I caught the vowel sounds, something like ether. I thought it might be her name, the way she said it, with the particular fall at the end that our liaison had flagged as the Vithu equivalent of stating your own name when uncertain of the other party's intentions. It was a very old courtesy, apparently. You say who you are so the stranger knows you aren't hiding it. I said my name back. Denny. 1 syllable, which in Vithu apparently means something close to an affirmative grunt, but she seemed to understand it was my name because she did the head tilt that means she was processing. I had 9 minutes before the last personnel carrier lifted from pad 7. I knew this because I had the manifest on my wrist unit and I had been the one to calculate the window. Fuel consumption, passenger weight, the 17-minute Rethkai resurgence cycle that our forward scouts had clocked. 9 minutes in that moment, and the girl across the arch from me hadn't moved, and I had 700 people on my manifest who were accounted for and I had this one who wasn't. I tried the translator. I said, in the 60% useful dialect, come with us. She didn't move. I said it again, and she said something back that my translator gave me as either I cannot or I am not permitted. The verb was ambiguous, and she pressed her hands harder against the floor, which the liaison had told us was a Vithu gesture for staying. Planting yourself. The Vithu had been farmers before they were a spacefaring people, and some things carry. I had 7 minutes by then. I thought about it for one of those minutes. I could go back for a carrier team, but the carrier teams were already running the last of the Eastern Sector civilians toward the pads, and pulling one off route would have meant leaving a gap in the chain that might mean someone else didn't make it out. I thought about lifting her myself, carrying her, the way you would with a child who is too frightened to move under their own power. I thought about what it would do to her, being carried against her will out of the only standing structure she'd found, and I thought about her hands pressed against the floor, the planting gesture, and I didn't do it. 6 minutes. I unwrapped the ration brick the rest of the way. It was the standard block, compressed grain composite with a mineral supplement baked in, the kind that tastes like nothing and keeps you upright for a full work shift. We'd been eating them for 6 weeks because the local food supply on Vithu station had been gone since the advance came through, and I had been counting them the same way I counted everything else, because that was my job. This was the last one I had allocated to myself for the day. There was a full resupply on the carrier. I wouldn't go hungry. That part was true, and I want to be clear about it, because I'm not trying to make myself sound like I gave up something enormous. I gave up 1 meal on a day when there was another meal waiting for me on a ship. That's the full accounting of it. I said it on the threshold of the arch. Not pushed toward her, set on the stone at the boundary, the way you'd put something down in neutral territory. Then I took out the ink stylus I used for manifest corrections, and I wrote her name on the brown paper wrapper. The 4 syllables as I'd heard them, Aetha. I wrote it large, the way you write something you want to be legible from a small distance, because she was still sitting back against the inner wall and I wanted her to be able to read it from where she was without having to come to the threshold to look. Then I wrote my name under hers. Denny Vash, Corporal, 3rd Logistics, Evacuation Force Tarvin. Unit stamp. Pad 7 departure date. I wrote all of it, because I had an ink stylus and brown paper and 2 minutes left, and it seemed important that she know it wasn't anonymous. That someone had stopped and seen her, and left their name so she could find them later if she wanted to, or not, but either way she would know that the stopping had been deliberate. I left the ration on the threshold and I walked back toward the pads. I made it to pad 7 with 40 seconds to spare. My manifest was complete except for one name I'd flagged as non-compliant shelter in place, which is the official category for civilians who refuse evacuation, and which looks clean on the paperwork even though it isn't. I logged it the way I was supposed to and I lifted with the rest of the force and I didn't look out the carrier port as we cleared atmosphere because I knew what Vithu station looked like from above by then, and looking wouldn't have changed anything. I thought about the ration brick a few more times over the next year, the way you think about the small things that don't resolve. Whether she'd eaten it. Whether the Rethkai had come back through before the Joint Relief Force arrived. Whether 4 syllables I'd barely caught were even her name. I didn't talk about it. There was nothing to say that didn't sound either self-congratulatory or useless, and I wasn't sure which it was, so I kept it to myself and did my job and eventually stopped thinking about it, the way you stop thinking about most things that don't resolve. 15 years later, I was stationed at Harvin Depot doing inventory oversight, the most boring job in the logistics branch, which is saying something, when a message came through on my official channel flagged with a Vithu diplomatic seal. The message was brief. It said that a senior aide to the Vithu Reconstruction Authority had been tracing the records of the Tarvin evacuation for a memorial project, and had found my name on a manifest, and was requesting a meeting at my earliest convenience to discuss the events of the evacuation. Standard language. Formal courtesy, nothing unusual. I almost filed it under the response queue and forgot about it for a week, because I get occasional archive requests and they're usually historians or journalists looking for a quote about the logistics of the Tarvin campaign. I didn't forget about it because the message was signed Ether Vurin, Senior Aide, Vithu Reconstruction Authority, and I recognized the name. I met her in the depot's visitor bay 3 days later. She was tall, the way adult Vithu are tall, and her fur had gone the deeper amber that marks secondary growth and then some. She was fully adult, established, carrying herself with the particular composed stillness of someone who has decided exactly how much of a moment they're going to let show. She had a carry case with her, the kind archivists use for fragile documents. She said my name. 1 syllable, the way I'd introduced myself in the arch. Then she said something in Vithu and waited while my translator caught up. Better translators now, 90% accuracy. And what it gave me was, I wanted you to know what happened to the wrapper. She opened the carry case and showed me a framed piece of brown mess paper, heat-sealed at one end, stamped in violet ink with a date 15 years old. The ink I'd used for the names had faded but was still legible. Her name at the top. Mine below. She said the relief force had found her in the arch 4 days after the evacuation lifted. She'd eaten the ration over those 4 days in pieces, rationing it the way she'd watched adults ration things during the advance, making it last. She'd kept the wrapper because I had her name on it and she was 8 years old and someone had written her name on something, which she told me in a tone that made it sound simple and which landed on me the way things land when they're simple and enormous at the same time. The wrapper was in the municipal hall of rebuilt Vithu station now, she said. There was a wall there, a memory wall, the Reconstruction Authority's word for it, and the wrapper was framed on it with a small plaque below. Her name and mine, the same order as the wrapper. She'd put it there herself, 3 years ago, when the hall opened. I didn't say anything useful. I'm not sure there was anything useful to say. I looked at the faded ink on the brown paper and I thought about 40 seconds and a single meal and a girl with her hands pressed flat on a stone floor, and I thought that 15 years is a long time for a piece of mess paper to hold together, and that logistics people understand the value of good materials even when they're wrapping something simple. She left the framed wrapper with me. I have it on the wall of my quarters now. Her name at the top, mine below, exactly the way I wrote it. That's the full accounting. I left a meal on a threshold for someone who was too frightened to come to the door. I wrote her name so she'd know I'd seen her. Everything after that was her.